on this episode of Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
Yeah, my name's Josh. The podcast is the Wild West Extravaganza, and I just talk about real life people and events from the Old West, cowboys, outlaws, gunfighters, that type of stuff. But then you kind of read into it, and it's like, okay, they didn't use any special software. The guy that just authenticated this photo, supposedly, he admits to just eyeballing it, right? So it's all a bunch of bull butter, in my opinion.
Well, you just proved 14-year-old Dustin wrong. So.
Hey, I proved 14-year-old Josh wrong too, man.
Yeah.
Raising the Wild Ones podcast.
Well, welcome to another episode of Raising the Wild Ones podcast. We have me, Caleb, and to my left, you can't see because it's audio. You're my left, Dustin, and then we have our special guest, Josh Taylor from the Wild West Extravaganza. Can you say it like you do on the podcast?
No.
Or is that like a copyright or something? You can't? Okay.
No, man. You know what? I used to say, I used to try to roll my R's when I said it, right? But I cannot roll my R's. So all I was doing was basically like gurgling with my throat, like the extravaganza. And I just felt weird knowing that I was like faking the rolling of the R. So I'm like, you know what? This is kind of lame. I'm just going to stop it.
Yeah.
Somebody actually called me out on it, and I felt really embarrassed. And I was like, I'm just going to stop doing it.
I got you.
Yeah. If I can do it, as soon as I learn how to roll my R's, it's on. I'm going to do it all day, every day. But until then.
Yeah.
I won't lie. I heard that it's like you don't learn to roll your R's. I heard you're born with it, right? And I don't know if that's true or not.
So it may never happen.
I've watched YouTube tutorials. I've talked to like native Spanish speakers. I can barely speak English, man. So when it comes to rolling my R's, I don't think it's going to happen, but who knows?
Caleb?
You just have to put your voice into AI and then somehow get it to do it for you.
Yeah, I really love AI.
Yeah. We mess around with it quite a bit too. So
yeah. We haven't yet, but Caleb actually wants to try to evangelize AI in a podcast episode. That's coming up at some point. I don't know how we're going to do that.
Well, hey, man, good luck.
Why not?
I was kind of joking when I said I love AI, but, Joe Rogan says AI may be the new Jesus.
Oh, good not. I have not heard that. No.
There you go. So
now I can see where people would use it as a way, and basically that would become a type of Jesus.
Yeah.
As far as like just worshiping that instead of anything else.
Yeah.
Because I guess now it's even like it's being used as therapy, and people are talking to it and falling in love with it, and all sorts of craziness.
I play around with it just to like, hey, tell me something about whoever. Tell me something about Wild Bill Hickok. And it'll just make up the most outrageous stuff. Like, it's like, that's not true whatsoever.
Yes, because it's like basically just searching Google or searching the internet for, and it can, I can type something up about Wild Bill, and then it could pull from that, know. So it's wild. But so I guess to introduce you a little bit, my father actually introduced me to your podcast, and you have a podcast about all things Wild West, and you can maybe explain a little bit more about what it is and here in just a minute. But so he told me about it years ago, and so I started listening to it, and over the years we really enjoy, you'll release a podcast, and every so often he'll say, hey, you need to listen to this one, or I'll listen to one and tell him, and we just really enjoy listening to your podcast and talking about some of the history and things, because we really enjoy. He's one of those guys. He knows all the words to every Western show or movie that's ever been made, and watches them 100 times and really enjoys it. But like we recently went on a mule deer hunt in New Mexico, and we were in the truck for I think 6 hours, and most of our 6 hours there, 6 hours back, and most of our time was spent listening to your podcast. So
I'm sorry.
We enjoy it.
That's good. Thank God.
Yeah. So if you want to, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about you, your podcast, and kind of how it came to be and what it is.
Yeah, my name's Josh. The podcast is the Wild West Extravaganza, and I just talk about real life people and events from the Old West, just cowboys, outlaws, gunfighters, that type of stuff. How it came to be, I was listening to a lot of podcasts. I'm a podcast fan myself, first and foremost. Like you were talking about being in a car or truck for 6 hours. I used to work overnight and operating a machine, driving a forklift, stuff like that. And I had an earbud in my ear, listening to podcasts for anywhere between like 8 to 12 hours a night. And I always kind of had in the back of my mind, I maybe I want to start a podcast one day. And I got really into this podcast called Time Suck, hosted by a guy named Dan Cummins. It's still my number one favorite podcast to this day. It is the perfect podcast, in my opinion. And I got really into that guy's show. And he did an episode one day about how he started his podcast and how he kind of like turned it into a career. And I got off work that morning. I went home. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to start a podcast. I made a list of all the stuff I like talking about that nobody wants to hear me talk about anymore that I personally know. And I wish I still had the list, man. If I wrote down 20 things, probably 16, 17 of them had something to do with like Old West history. So that's where I was like, okay, I'm just going to start a podcast about Old West history. And here we are. I never thought I would actually anybody would listen. It was just purely like I don't know, a creative outlet at first. I legitimately did not think anybody would listen.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Were you good at history in high school?
No, I barely graduated high school. I liked history in high school. Some of the stuff. But no, I wasn't good at anything in school. Nothing. I wasn't even good at lunch, man.
What drew you to the Wild West? What drew you to the Old West?
Well, I've always now school and free time is completely different. I've always had a little bit of a fascination with history. So even other aspects other than Old West history, but I guess the Old West thing, you know, growing up in Texas, my parents both read a lot, so there was always like, you know, Louis L'Amour paperbacks sitting around the house, all those old Western novels, stuff like that. My dad, there's a running joke in our house when I was growing up. If Lonesome Dove was on TV, my dad was going to watch it, right? Doesn't matter how many times we've seen it before. And so I grew up reading and watching Western movies, excuse me. And then I guess as I got older, I just got kind of curious about the real people, you know, one of the things, Young Guns 2 came out when I was, I think, in the fourth grade. And I really got into the Young Guns movies. Like we used to play Young Guns at recess. I had the Bon Jovi soundtrack, all that whole 9 yards. So as I got older, especially with Billy the Kid, I wanted to learn about the real Billy the Kid. Like, is this stuff they show in the movies true? And it just sort of morphed from there, you know? I got really interested in the mountain men, fur trappers, you know, the Rocky Mountain fur trapping era. And yeah, it just
You ever seen Jeremiah Johnson?
Nuh-uh. Who's in it?
Isn't that the
I'm messing with you. Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it many times.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Jeremiah Johnson, dude. I have a whole episode on that real life guy, liver eating Johnson's what they called him. But yeah, dude, that's Jeremiah Johnson's up there. That's probably one of my top 20 movies, I would say, probably. It's one of those you just watch over and over again.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
It's a good one. I don't know. I haven't seen that one in a long time.
Yeah. So getting into let's the first topic we wanted to discuss was a little bit about Billy the Kid. So my first question on Billy the Kid was why Billy? What made him different than, let's say, somebody like Jesse Evans, who also was around in that area at the time and also was a quite a bit of an outlaw? And then, you know, why Billy, other than say him, maybe compared to like somebody like why Billy? What made him so special? And why is it now that, like, you know, New Mexico is kind of built on Billy the Kid? You know what I mean? So what made him so special, and why has he become such this big figure from that time period?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is Billy the Kid's way more famous now than he was at the time of his death. And that's not to say that he was unknown or anything like that. He was regionally well known, and there was even some newspapers as far away as like New York City that published articles about him. But he was nowhere. He wasn't at the same level as somebody like Jesse James. Just as an example, when Billy the Kid had $500 reward out on him, Jesse James at the same time had $10,000.
10,000.
So yeah, Jesse James was like an international superstar at that time of Outlaws, and Billy the Kid was just a local guy, you know.
And I actually saw on that real quick. I saw that when they put the reward out, they spelt his name wrong.
Who, Billy's?
Billy the Kid, I think, is what this website says.
Huh.
They spelt Bonnie wrong. Well, anyways.
Yeah, well, you know, interestingly enough, Bonnie was actually a alias. So his real name was Henry McCarty. But yeah, there's a lot of people that they would call him Kid Antrim, William Bonnie, Billy Bonnie, and oh yeah, I've seen it spelled a lot of different ways, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, man, one of the things that really sort of made Billy more well known, there was a guy named Walter Noble Burns, and he visited Texas. I believe he was a reporter out of I think Chicago, and I believe he was down on the border with Mexico covering Pancho Villa. And he stepped into a saloon one day in El Paso, and there was a pistol hanging up on the wall. And he got to talking to the bartender, and come to find out that was Pat Garrett's pistol that he used to kill Billy the Kid. I guess Garrett owed the guy some money or something and gave him the pistol as collateral. But that kind of sparked the curiosity in Burns, and he came back to the Southwest a few years later. This was in the 1920s, and he started traveling around New Mexico. And at that time, there were still people alive that knew Billy the Kid. There were still people living at Fort Sumner that were at Fort Sumner on the night that Billy was killed. And he interviewed a lot of these people, including Paulita Maxwell, that was Billy's one of his girlfriends. And he published a book, I believe in 1926, called The Saga of Billy the Kid. And it was a huge bestseller. Like, this thing was selling like hotcakes, man. And that's really what sort of made him a household name. And, you know, the movies followed after that. I would have to look up and see the first movie that was actually based on Billy the Kid. I want to say maybe 1930. So just a few years later. I could be wrong. Now, there is an argument to be made that they were already making movies about him. I know there was a movie titled Billy the Kid. It came out like 15 years before Burns wrote his book. But I've never seen it. It's a silent film. I don't know for certain that it's actually based on the Billy the Kid. I think that's just the title of the movie. The main character is a female that's like masquerading as a dude. So I don't think it's actually about the historical Billy the Kid. But long story short, Burns played a very big role in making Billy a household name. Of course, the movie. And you know who else he did that to? We can thank Walter Noble Burns for Wyatt Earp, because a couple of years after he wrote the book about Billy the Kid, he wrote one on Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. And then they started making movies about them. But, you know, almost all of your well-known figures from that era, it really comes down to, did somebody write a best-selling book? Or did they have somebody in their corner that was writing them? Like Jesse James, he had a newspaper editor named John Newman Edwards writing about his exploits, making him famous. Wild Bill Hickok, he had, there was this Harper's Magazine article that came out, I want to say in the late 1860s, and turned him into a legend almost overnight. Within his own lifetime, he became a famous guy. So it's not necessarily that they had like more exciting lives. Like there's 100 different guys from the Old West that nobody's ever heard of that lived extraordinarily fascinating lives, but nobody wrote any books about them and nobody made any movies about them. Billy the Kid, I mean, what is it? Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid is considered to be like one of the greatest movies of all time. Then you had the Young Guns movies that came out, and that brought a whole new generation in that was fascinated with Billy the Kid. So it's just sort of the perfect storm. Also, not to take anything away from him, but he did leave a pretty fascinating life. I mean,
he for sure did.
He probably wasn't even 21 at the time of his death. He may have still been just 20 years old. And just the life that he packed into those 20 years is amazing. And very sympathetic character, right? I mean, a lot of people consider him like an underdog. He was sticking up for the little guy against the Santa Fe ring. He was well liked, especially by the Hispanic population. By most accounts, he was a happy-go-lucky guy. He liked to dance. He liked the ladies. He liked to joke around. He was a voracious reader, you know. So he didn't have like that really bad mean streak that you see with a lot of outlaws, you know. It's just, and also because he died so young, we never saw like Billy the old man, the angry guy. He died at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows how he would have turned out if he lived to be 30, 40. He may have done some very, very bad things, and he may not be remembered as fondly as he is now.
With a lot of those early books that were written, how much was it embellished? I guess that's something I've always kind of wondered about.
Yeah.
Was there like just massive amounts of embellishment in these early books, or did they stick closely to the historical account, or does it vary between writers?
It's really hard to say, man, because they never list their sources. So if you get a good reputable book on, we'll use Billy the Kid as an example. There's a book, one of my favorites on Billy the Kid is by Robert Utley, A Short and Violent Life. There's another one that James B. Mills just put out a couple of years ago, Billy the Kid, Bandito Simpatico, which I think would probably be one of the more definitive biographies on Billy the Kid. And if you look at these books, I don't think I have one here to show you, but oh, you got okay right there.
Yeah, that right there.
Flip to the back and see how much of that is just sources.
I haven't read it all. I've only read like one chapter so far.
But if you go back in that book, he's going to list a source for everything he says, right? And this is how we can go back and we can kind of corroborate all these different events. Unfortunately, when you get into those early books like Walter Noble Burns, he doesn't list any of his sources unless he's specifically citing somebody that he's interviewing, like Paulita Maxwell, for instance, or some of those other old timers. You can see where it's literally in quotation marks. So I guess we're basically taking his word for it that, okay, this is what these people actually said. And same thing if you even go further back to Pat Garrett, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid. Now, he had a ghostwriter, Ash Upson, that wrote a lot of that. That's why, curiously enough, Billy the Kid's birthday is the same birthday as Ash Upson. So you tell me, is that a coincidence, or did Ash Upson just substitute his birthday because he didn't know Billy's birthday? But if you can kind of tell the parts that Ash Upson wrote, and you can kind of tell the parts that Pat Garrett wrote. Pat Garrett's stuff is pretty accurate as far as the known history that we know by the time they were actually hunting the kid and stuff like that. So, excuse me. It's really hard to tell, to be honest with you. That's why I've got a couple of books on that were written in the late 19th century or the early 20th century. Wait, yeah, I'm getting my centuries mixed up. And it can be very hard, man, because a lot of it just reads like a novel, and the authors will sort of invent dialogue that may or may not be true. Walter Noble Burns, for example, the same guy that wrote about Billy the Kid. I mentioned he also wrote about Wyatt Earp. That iconic phrase from Tombstone, "I'm your Huckleberry." Well, that comes from Walter Noble Burns. Now, Walter Noble Burns did talk. I believe he spoke with Wyatt Earp. He talked to some other old timers who had been in Tombstone. Did one of them tell him that Doc Holliday said that, or did he just invent that dialogue? You know what I mean? We have no way of knowing because he never listed his sources. But we know in a lot of those cases, like with Burns, he did go and speak with the people. But then again, I mean, shoot, you read one of these biographies on these guys, and they're all full of lies. If it's a biography that one of these guys wrote, or an autobiography that they wrote themselves, just assume that about 90% of it is made up. That's been my experience, at least.
Yeah. And especially were there many, say, dime store novels about Billy the Kid that were just wild and outlandish and out there, like some of these?
Oh yeah,
some of these other outlaws. Yeah,
absolutely, man. With all these guys, and that's why whenever I try to do my research, I try to corroborate as much as I can. Okay, so somebody said Billy the Kid was in a certain location at a certain time. Are there any other sources that say that same thing? And sometimes you can corroborate and sometimes you can't.
Man. Well, I've always been just kind of curious about stuff like that. One of the things that I like to research is pirates. I'm a weird person, but it's kind of like when you dive into that, I know I'm weird. It's fine. There's a book that was written in like 1724 that's about pirates, and half of the pirates are mentioned in there. It's just, this is the only spot that it mentions that particular pirate. And it's like, well, okay, if this is a book and I've been just real curious, especially with the Wild West, if it was a lot of the same way or if it was just more different where we're getting more the actual story of of what actually happened, with some of these, in a lot of ways, like giants of the Wild West,
Yeah, I'd say it might be a little bit better just because, the Wild West just didn't disappear when the clock struck midnight on the year 1900. If Billy the Kid was still alive on the year 1900, we don't think of that time period as being the Old West. He would only been 40 years old, right?
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
some of these people did live long enough to speak with journalists and historians, and so that does give us a little bit better corroboration. Whereas you go back to the pirates and stuff, I don't know, man.
Oh
Maybe
gosh, nobody knows.
they had to walk the plank.
Yeah, exactly.
Start asking
You
too
know,
many
you don't
questions.
you don't think of how close we are to their time. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude.
You don't think of how close we are to their time because, yeah.
There are
We're
people
lagging, I
alive
think.
right now who
There
were
we go.
alive at the same time as Wyatt Earp.
That's
That
wild
is
to even
wild.
think about.
I
Yeah,
didn't
it's crazy to
know
think about.
that.
He died in what, 1929? So let me double check that. I'm gonna have people very angry at me if I got that wrong. But
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
1929, going on record.
but yeah, I
It's just
mean,
wild to
Because
even.
I was
1929,
thinking if Billy would have lived, yeah.
yeah, 1929, that's when Wyatt Earp. So if you're 98 years old, congratulations. You were sucking in air at the same time as a dude that got in a gunfight in Tombstone, you know.
I don't. It seems just so far away, but I
It
guess
does,
it's. I
yeah.
mean, it's not. It really isn't. But I mean,
Yeah.
I even remember stories from my great grandfather who was alive, in the early 1900s, and I mean the way he would
Mhm.
talk about, the Great Depression and stuff like that. You're like,
Yeah.
that's. I mean, it feels like the Wild West. You're like, but that's not the Wild West. That's not it. They had tractors back then. It's different.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But I guess it. I mean, it's not. It's really right there. It's
It's great.
close.
My grandma, same thing. She's not around anymore. She'd be well over 100 years old now, but I can't remember. She was born in maybe 1914, somewhere around there. When she was a little girl, they moved from Texas to Oklahoma in a covered wagon. Okay. Cars were around, but they were poor, they didn't have a car.
Yeah.
When they moved back to Texas, they did have a vehicle at that time, and her older brothers were the ones that drove the wagon, everybody else drove in the car. But I used to spend all the time with my grandma. So I used to hang out at her place all the time, and she literally rode in a covered wagon. And this was, into the 20th century, but or yeah,
But still,
but still,
yeah.
man, it's crazy. My dad grew up in a very
Yeah.
rural part of East Texas, and they plowed the fields. They didn't have electricity. They plowed the fields with a mule. They did not have a tractor. My grandpa didn't break down to buy a tractor until my dad moved out of the house. It's just a lot of that may depend on just where you live.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
I mean,
didn't
that's the
have
same
they
with.
used an outhouse. They had a smokehouse. They had all that. So they were living like it was the 1800s in the 1940s.
I mean, it's my great grandfather had the
Yeah.
same. We had the same homestead outside of San Angelo in a small town, well, outside of Miles, Texas, actually.
Yeah.
But I saw the outhouse, and he would be like, "Oh, that's the old outhouse over there," and I'm like, "It's
Yeah.
half fallen apart, back in the '90s,
Hmm.
But it's like to think, well, no, that was the original outhouse from then. So, well, do you have like, what is like your favorite, I guess, story? Do you have a good account of Billy the Kid? Like maybe your favorite one, you know,
About Billy the Kid.
or anyone. I mean, I'm up for anything here.
I love talking all things Billy the Kid. I think one of my favorite stories to tell people about the Old West, just because it's just so nobody ever talks about it. There was so Geronimo surrendered in, when was it, 1895, somewhere around there. And that was basically the end of the so-called Indian Wars in North America. Not all of the Apache surrendered with him. There was a small band that drifted down into northern Mexico, and they hid out in the Sierra Madres, and they were still conducting raids well into the 1920s and 30s. The 1920s and 30s,
Wow.
they raided into Texas. No, yes, New Mexico, near the Animas Mountains, I believe. And they killed a cowboy, and I want to say it was 1924, 1926, somewhere around there. They hightailed it. They headed west into Arizona. I think they stole some horses, hightailed it back down south of the border, and they finally they had killed this rancher's wife and stole one of his kids in northern Mexico, and he ended up like basically like recruiting a small army, and they went up there and started wiping them out. But if anybody wants to look this up, they're known as the Bronco Apache. But it is wild to think that, we were just talking about if Wyatt Earp was still alive in 1929, well, there were still wild, quote unquote. I hate to say wild. I don't want to sound I don't want to disrespect these people. They were basically living in exile, but they were still living the old ways, in the 1930s. With movies, people were watching movies. There were airplanes, It's wild to think about.
I mean, it's coming up on World War II. I mean, it's man.
Billy the Kid would have been 80. Yeah, he would have been 80 in World War during. Yeah, that's
there
wild.
was a guy named Jason Betsinez. I don't know his birth name, but he was an Apache. He rode with Geronimo when he was a teenager. He lived long enough. I want to say he died in 1960, but at some point in the late 1950s, he appeared on a TV show, like one of those Guess My Name TV shows, they used to have back in the 50s. But he wrote a book and he said that there were still Apaches living in northern Mexico, living free when he published his book in the 1950s. Now, whether or not that's accurate, I don't know. But now, full disclosure, whenever that Mexican rancher went up there with his crew and they started wiping them out, by that point, they didn't find any men. All they found was women. So the men may have already been dead by that point, just due to disease and raids and possibly even starvation. All they found were women and children.
Man.
Oh yeah. So I have a listener question. So my dad, I told my dad, I said, I told him to get me a question. So his question is, what was the relationship between Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid? And I know you've discussed this on your podcast quite a bit, but what was that relationship like between them? Like, let's say before Pat Garrett started actually looking and hunting for Billy, what was like, if they would have come across each other, were they pals like in Young Guns, or what was that relationship like?
Yes and no. So they were friends. And, it's interesting because a lot of times their friendship either gets downplayed or it gets overplayed. Now, according to Paulita Maxwell, they were very good friends. They called Pat Garrett. They called him the long and short of it, or something like that. They had some sort of nickname for him. She said, they would hang out, they would gamble together, they would have a good time together. If Pat Garrett was broke, he would borrow money from Billy, vice versa. Billy would borrow money from him if he was down on his luck. However, there's no evidence, like in Young Guns 2, that they were outlaw buddies together. There's zero evidence. Like, for instance, Pat Garrett was not a Lincoln County regulator. He was living in Fort Sumner when the Lincoln County War was going on, but he did not participate. And there's no indication that he was out there stealing cattle with Billy or anything like that. My opinion, just based on what little I know, is they were friends at Fort Sumner. They got along very well at Fort Sumner. And Pat was several years older than Billy as well. They wouldn't like. I mean, I'd have to look up. I want to say he was at least 6 or 7 years older than Billy. But yeah, by according to Paulita Maxwell, they were good friends. Now, were they good friends the last time they met? I don't think so. Yeah, by that point, basically once Garrett decided to accept that job as sheriff, that friendship went out the window. There's actually a funny story. You asked about funny Billy the Kid stories or interesting stories. When Garrett was running as sheriff, Billy was making the rounds trying to get people to vote for the other guy. I forget his name. So Billy was actually knocking on people's doors and saying, "Hey, don't vote for this guy. Vote for the other guy." Gosh, man, I'm drawing a blank on the.
And that's the real. That's the real reason he went and shot him.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but no. By that point, they had already they knew what was up. Excuse me. Billy knew Garrett. It was his job now to kill him or at least arrest him. And he did arrest it. You got to think before Pat Garrett killed Billy the Kid, he had already killed a couple of his good friends, Tom Folliard and Charlie Bowdry. He had already arrested the kid and delivered him to the courts that sentenced him to hang, And so yeah, there was no love lost by 1881. They were no longer friends. A lot of people will kind of question this, like, well, why would he kill him if they were such good friends? But I mean, you guys talk about the Bible, right? The little Cain and Abel story. So sometimes even brothers kill one another.
Yeah.
I personally know a guy that was killed by his best friend. So it does happen, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And one thing you mentioned the trial, and I don't know, have you ever read, it's The Trial of Billy the Kid by David G. Thomas?
I have that book.
It's an interesting. You have that book?
Yeah, I have. I haven't read it yet. I've read a couple of his other books. He's got a great book on Billy the Kid's grave too. He's that guy right there. What I love about David G. Thomas, he only uses primary sources. So there's no speculation. He's not giving his opinion. He is straight up just citing the primary sources. If you've got any questions about the trial now, I don't know if I'll be able to answer them. I'll try that.
Well, I was gonna say one big thing I took from the book was when he actually went to trial, the majority of the jury were Spanish speaking, like couldn't speak English, and the trial was in English.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So he didn't have much luck there.
I think Billy was he was sort of a patsy,
Yes.
He was sentenced to hang for the death of Sheriff Brady. But did he actually shoot Brady? He was in on it. He was certainly there. If it was a modern day, I think about it like a mob hit, right? Whether you're the trigger man or whether you're the getaway driver, you're just as guilty of conspiring to murder somebody. So he was certainly in on it. But nobody else was sentenced to hang from the Lincoln County War, and there were some very, very nasty people involved in that. A lot of people way more cold blooded than Billy the Kid. So I think they sort of kind of made him out to be the fall guy. And it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, that they had no idea what they were deliberating on.
Interesting. That's interesting.
But that's I need to.
And one of my
trial.
Yeah. And one of my favorite stories of Billy the Kid is when he shoots Bob Ollinger and what was the deputy's name? Bell. Deputy Bell. And Bell, right? Okay, yeah, and shoots him in the stairwell. And we've actually gone to the Lincoln County Courthouse several times with my kids, and we really enjoy walking around there. And I don't know have you ever been there?
I am making the pilgrimage this year, come heck or high water. I have not been yet, but I really want to go. I'm really looking forward.
Hey, we need to have like a dual podcast. We need to go and have a dual podcast there.
There you go, man.
But in the stairwell they have it's funny, they have a bullet hole in the wall. I don't know if you know much about this, and it's funny because you ask the people there and they're like, yeah, that's the real bullet hole, but then you look up, you do research, and it's like, no, that's been redone multiple times.
So one thing I like to keep in mind is we know very little about Billy the Kid in the grand scheme of things. And you want to talk about like whether something's been corroborated or not. We still don't know where he got the pistol that he used to shoot Bell. We still don't know if he shot Bell at the top of the staircase, at the bottom of the staircase. Like, there's so many different factors in there. And I don't really want to speak too much about this, but I've heard anecdotal stories about people coming in and kind of making up some false evidence, dealing directly with the stairwell and all that stuff. So I don't know if that's a genuine bullet hole, but it could be, and it would not surprise me if it was a fake either.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to ask about was we live close to Hyco. We're about how far? 45 minutes to an hour from Hyco.
Yeah.
Where Brushy Bill was. What do you think about Brushy Bill? Oh, have you?
Yeah.
We're not far from there. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to Hyco I guess a couple of years ago. And it was interesting. Brushy Bill, I mean, it's a nothing thing. He. So the thing with Brushy Bill is if you take it all at face value. So, okay, there was this, if I told you, okay, this old man came forward in the late 1940s. He claimed to be Billy the Kid. He had all the same scars as Billy the Kid. He knew things that only Billy the Kid could have known. And there were people that knew Billy the Kid and said that he was Billy the Kid. You hear that, and then you couple that with all the other stories people tell about Billy the Kid's death, like, um, for instance, one of Pat Garrett's deputies said that Garrett shot the wrong man, or they buried the body before anybody could get a good look at it. And you start hearing all this, and you're like, wait a second, there might be something to this, you know? But it's all once you dig just a little bit deeper, it all falls apart. For instance, the scars.
Mm-hmm.
There's no evidence he had any scars, none whatsoever. I don't care if somebody tells you there was an autopsy. There was no autopsy on Brushy Bill Roberts. There's no photo evidence of the scars. There's nothing like that. He knew things that nobody else could possibly know. Not true. He started saying he was Billy the Kid in the 1940s. There were already a ton of books and movies out about Billy the Kid by that point. So it wasn't like in some of these books is stuff that historians still use for their sources. So it's not like he didn't have anything to work with. For the longest time, people would point to the Battle of Lincoln. If anybody listening's ever seen Young Guns, at the very end, there's this big battle where the army shows up in Lincoln. Well, Brushy Bill Roberts said that there were black soldiers that arrived at Lincoln, which is true. But that book I mentioned earlier, The Saga of Billy the Kid, that also mentions the black soldiers. And I told you that book was very, very popular. In fact, a lot of the same stuff that we know that Brushy got wrong, Walter Noble Burns also got the same exact things wrong in The Saga of Billy the Kid. So kind of makes you think that Brushy read that book, right? And then you get into the people that signed the affidavit saying that they were the same person. Well, most of those people never knew the historical Billy the Kid. One of them wasn't even alive yet in 1881. So if they weren't alive, how could they know if he was the real Billy the Kid, right? The best they could find, there were two old men living in Lincoln, Jose Montoya and Gallegos, Severo Gallegos. And they did vouch for Brushy, okay? However, Severo Gallegos initially said he was way too young to be Billy the Kid, which he was. He was only 70 at the time. He was much younger than Severo Gallegos. And Severo and Montoya, they weren't like, people have this misconception that Billy the Kid's fellow outlaws vouched for him, or Lincoln County regulators, or even lawmen that used to hunt down Billy the Kid, that some of these guys vouched for Brushy. No. Severo and Montoya, they were children when Billy the Kid died. They may or may not have seen him whenever he was in Lincoln, but it's not like they were bosom buddies or anything like that, right? So that is literally the only evidence we have. And there were people alive at that time who still knew Billy the Kid. Gosh, man, I'm blanking on their names right now. I can email you their names later on, but there were a couple of guys that knew Billy the Kid, and they refused to vouch for Brushy. So, and then you look into the actual history of the guy. He's on every single census record from 1880 when he was 2 years old, all the way until his death in 1950 in Hyco. He's on a World War I draft registration. He's got marriage certificates. There's a daggum family Bible that has his birthday written in there. He was a toddler when Billy the Kid died. And then you go back and you look at all the supposed mystery surrounding Billy the Kid's death, and much in the same way, it's all ado about nothing, right? So, like I said earlier, that one of Pat Garrett's deputies said that Garrett shot the wrong man. Well, that was John W. Poe. That comes directly from John W. Poe's book, and he literally writes, Pat, you killed the wrong man. Billy would not come here. Well, if you just read another couple of paragraphs, he's like, oh, and then we got a lantern and we looked in the window and we went in and inspected the body, and yeah, it was Billy the Kid. So he was just, if you read the book, he makes it very clear that neither he nor Garrett thought they would find Billy at Fort Sumner that night. They felt like they were on a wild goose chase. So when Garrett shot and came running out of Pete Maxwell's room, said he killed Billy, John W. Poe was like, nah, he wouldn't be in there. And then turns out he was in there. The story is about them burying Billy before anybody could get a good look at the body. That's not true whatsoever. There was a very public wake all night. There was a public funeral. Historians have identified over 40 people by name who saw Billy the Kid's dead body, people who lived at Fort Sumner. So you start adding this all up together. He had one of the more well-documented deaths of the Old West, to be honest. And then you look into Brushy Bill Roberts and you find out all the holes in his story. There's zero evidence supporting any. And then what they never tell you about Brushy Bill is all the other stuff he said. Or I don't know if y'all are familiar with this, but
I was wanting that. Yeah. Did he claim to be Frank James at one point?
no.
Or did I make that up?
No, you maybe.
No, okay.
I've heard stories about him possibly claiming to be Jesse James. I'm not sure if that's true.
Maybe that was it.
That.
Yeah.
Now he did hang out with a guy named J. Frank Dalton who claimed to be Jesse James. That may be what you're thinking about.
Okay.
He was friends with other frauds, essentially.
Yeah.
But he did the crazy stuff. He was a boxer in Cincinnati. He was a Pinkerton detective. He was a Rough Rider in Cuba. He was a mercenary in Mexico with Pancho Villa. He lived with three different Indian tribes. He was a gunfighter in Idaho. He worked for Buffalo Bill Cody. He was a lookout for Bell Star. It's just he's the Forrest Gump of the Wild West. He had his own Wild West show. It toured all over the place. He caught wild horses in South America, and there is zero evidence. When I say zero, I'm not saying there's weak evidence. I'm saying there is zero corroborating evidence. So on one end of the spectrum, you have actual primary sources, corroborated information, and on the other side, you just have this old guy telling stories. And if you want to believe him, that's fine, but just know there's no evidence to back it up. It's a fun story. It's fun to think about. And man, hey, 12-year-old Josh believed it 100%. That was Brushy Bill, ride or die. Okay. But as I got older, what is it? You put away the things when you're a child, you act as a child, and yeah.
Well, I remember,
you put away childish things. Yeah.
As a kid like that, like 13, 14-year-old watching the classic History Channel segment, and it's like, did Billy the Kid actually die? And I'm like, well, what did he? And it's a kid, like, oh wow, what? Oh, look at all of it. Look at all of this evidence they're telling me right now about this guy. And that's probably my favorite part of what you've talked about, because up until now I thought, I wonder, but I had the old school History Channel, segment to go off of. That's all I think about.
You only know what you know, right?
Yeah.
So it's no fault of anybody's if they believe it, because this stuff is just repeated nonstop, not only on the internet, YouTube and stuff like that, but on the History Channel, right? There's all kinds of show. What was it? Brad Meltzer, people like that. What was that dude's name? Yeah. Bill O'Reilly wrote a book talking about Brushy Bill Roberts and being Billy the Kid. So people trust these quote unquote official sources, and they believe what they say without looking into it themselves. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, but I have read a lot of the primary sources with Billy the Kid. And I think it's an information kind of thing,
Yeah.
If you can learn about anything if you get the books and start reading. Like you held up that book by James Mills, Billy the Kid, Bandito, Simpatico. Anybody can grab one of these good reputable books. You flip to the back and you get a list of all the sources, and you start reading that stuff, and it'll really open your eyes up to it. And then you look at the other side of the coin, and there's really nothing to read because there's no sources. That's why a lot of the people that are really big proponents of Brushy Bill Roberts, they'll mostly rely on either anecdotal stories, like my great grandfather's hairdresser was next door neighbors to Pat Garrett's mailman, and according to him, Billy the Kid was not killed in 1881. Or they rely on very shady forensics, right? I can find somebody right now that will verify a picture of your grandmother and say that was Billy the Kid if you pay him enough money, right? And there's no science behind it. A lot of times people hear, they did a forensic study on these photos, and turns out Brushy Bill Roberts was Billy the Kid. But then you kind of read into it, and it's like, okay, they didn't use any special software. The guy that just authenticated this photo, supposedly, he admits to just eyeballing it, right? So it's all a bunch of bull butter, in my opinion.
Man, Well, you just proved 14-year-old Dustin wrong. So
hey, I proved 14-year-old Josh wrong too, man. Hey, dude, I wanted Bigfoot to be here. I grew up watching Young Guns 2 and Harry and the Hendersons, man. I wanted Brushy Bill and Bigfoot to be real. I still ain't seen no quicksand, dude. We were supposed to be running from quicksand forever.
That's true, man.
Lava, quicksand.
Yeah.
Bermuda
Triangle. Nobody hears
really
about that
big
anymore.
problem. Yeah.
Oh. I honestly, though,
another story from that time that another story from that time I really wish was true was him meeting Jesse James.
That could be true. I don't.
I'm
neutral on it, but there is some evidence. There's some evidence that Jesse James was in Las Vegas at the same time. It was written about in the papers. He certainly is not out of the realm of possibility. It could have happened. I don't know if it did or if it didn't. I don't think they were necessarily friends. Some people will try to say that Jesse was trying to recruit Billy into his gang. I don't think that. Jesse James, he came from some hardened guerrillas. These were flat out murderers and killers. He didn't need to travel all the way to New Mexico to recruit Billy the Kid, And Billy the Kid wasn't known for doing any of that stuff. He wasn't a bank robber or a train robber. He just stole cattle on occasion, horses every now and then, and that was that. But they could have met. Who knows, man? I don't know if that one will ever be solved. I think it's possible, but I'm not going to say it definitely happened.
Yeah. That's one of those things that's cool to think about, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure, man.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Las Vegas, New Mexico, you had Billy the Kid. He hung out there for a while. Doc Holliday. Wyatt Earp was in Las Vegas, New Mexico. Mysterious Dave Mather, Hoodoo Brown, a lot of the Dave Rudaball, some of the lesser known people. Yeah. Las Vegas was a legit this is Las Vegas, New Mexico for anybody listening. That was a legit Wild West town, no doubt about it. Doc Holliday hung out there. He lived there for a little bit. He had a saloon there.
Man, gosh.
Huh.
This has been fun, man.
Well,
I've really enjoyed it so far.
I'm glad you're liking it, man. Enjoying myself.
Well, do you have any questions for us? Yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything else, Dustin? I guess if we have time, we could get into a little bit of like John Wesley Hardin, some of those guys that came from. We may not have time for that today, though. I don't know.
Well, you asked me in the email you mentioned something about like guys that preachers' kids, right? The sons of ministers that ended up.
Yes.
And John Wesley Hardin's probably the most famous example. There was also a guy named Clay Allison. His father was a minister. Jesse James, his father was a minister. So, and those, interestingly enough, are some of the craziest dudes from that era. Deacon Jim Miller, his father wasn't a minister, but he himself was a pretty regular churchgoer. He was, I want to say he was a legit deacon in the Methodist Church. So you know what they say, man, about those preachers' kids.
Hey, me and Caleb are both deacons, so we could be.
There you go. I'm gonna keep my eye on you guys, man. Watch out, everybody.
Watch out, man.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Well, man, let's see. We're kind of getting towards the end here, but before we go, do you want to let our listeners know where they can find you or find out more about your podcast or all that kind of fun stuff? Or if they want to get in touch with you.
Yeah, wildwestextra.com is my website, but you can find the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, pretty much all the places. And yeah, man, if you go to my website, everything's listed there too. And guess that's it.
Sweet. Awesome. Oh, cool.
Well, cool. Man, we sure do appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
It's been a ton of fun, and you proved 14-year-old Dustin wrong, and so which wasn't very hard to do. I won't lie.
Hey, man. I say, let him have his dreams, dude. let him enjoy it for a couple more years.
Let him enjoy it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, my friend.
Yes, thank y'all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for listening to Raising the Wild Ones podcast. I know me and Caleb are just a couple of redneck theologians, right? Kind of came up with that term a little while ago, and it's just kind of making us laugh. But that's really just what we are, right? Every single one of us is a theologian. Sit there and just think about the Bible, and me and Caleb are rednecks, so that makes us redneck theologians. And so we just thank you guys for listening to us. And if you want to just give us a holler and let us know about topics you may want to listen to, or things you may want to say, or if you have an idea for a guest host, or if you yourself want to be a guest host, just drop us a line. Just let us know. Just give us a ring on the old telly. Actually, not really. We don't have a cell phone number, right? But we do have an email, and you can send us an email, right, at raisingwildonespodcast@gmail.com. There'll be a link for that podcast down in the description. And so just kind of click on that and just let us know what you guys want to hear from us. And we like to hear from you guys too. We like to know what you guys think of our podcast. And so also just tell your friends, share it on social media. Just let people know when you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with your hunting buddies or fishing buddies, just say, hey guys, listen to this podcast. It's these two rednecks, and they're kind of weird sometimes, but it's fine because they talk about some cool stuff. And so just let people know, and that's how the word gets out, and that's how it gets shared. So we just thank you guys so much for your support and for listening to us. And yeah, tune in next time for more from the Redneck Theologians.
Hey, Wild Ones. Do you love what you've been hearing? Our deep dives into theology, Bible stories, and the Word of God? If so, we need your help. For just $6 a month, which is less than a cup of coffee these days, you can join our Patreon community. It's a simple but powerful way to support our mission of sharing the gospel with as many people as possible. And when you join, you'll get some awesome perks like early access to episodes, detailed show notes, and even biblically accurate coloring pages you won't find anywhere else, trust me. Plus, we're giving 10% of everything we receive straight to missions, so your support goes even further. So click the link below in the show notes and join us on Patreon today. Let's keep raising the wild ones together.